Well, obviously, communication is the lifeblood of relationship. And nobody would argue with that. And basically, you can't love what you don't know. And how do we get to know each other? Well, we have to communicate. But the problem is that when we hear that, we talk about communication, we almost always focus on verbal communication. And verbal communication is only part of the story. We have verbal communication, we have nonverbal communication. We often have something that Kathy and I like to focus on, which we call sexual communication, which is a combination of verbal and nonverbal that has a very specific purpose to it.
It's everything you do and say to communicate your desire to get close to each other, to be one. So that's a whole other thing. So communication is a huge, huge topic. But even within, I think you're aiming at verbal communication. Yes. And within verbal communication, I think the biggest danger is to lump it all into talking. We're just going to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. But there are different verbal skills for different outcomes, right? And so we have kind of an approach of sort of like if you play golf, you have a whole bag of golf clubs. You don't use the same club for every shot, okay? There may be a driver in that bag that you use most often, all right? But still, when we're communicating to try and make a decision, it's a different skill set than when we're just trying to get an emotional connection and feel close to each other, or when we're trying to direct our life. That's totally different. That's a discernment kind of communication. Or if we're trying to share our faith life or what's going on inside of us in terms of our relationship with God. You need communication for everything from forgiving each other when there's a hurt, to affirming each other, and making the other feel lovable. I mean, really, communication hits every aspect of relationship in some form.
And communicating involves both speaking, the willingness and openness to reveal yourself or communicate, get in touch with who you are, but also the ability to listen and draw out the other person, but also to take in and absorb what is being shared with you.
That's particularly, I think, important with, I make a distinction between communicating to transfer information, and that's important to do well so you're not misunderstood, because misunderstanding causes hurt and distance and all that. So you want to learn those skills. But then there's a whole other mindset of communicating to get to know who the other person is, and really taste what it's like to be him or her.
If you look at communication as a system, you always have a message, something that you want to communicate, but you've got a transmitter and you've got a receiver. And in order for me to take a thought or something that I want Kathy to hear or understand, or something to communicate to Kathy, I've got to package that thought. I use the words the way I'm used to expressing myself, but that pure thought gets packaged in some way, and there's some limitations because it goes through my filters in order to be packaged. But then I communicate that to Kath, and she has to decode what she thinks she heard because she has her own set of filters. And part of communicating well, is acknowledging that those filters exist and learning how to decode what the other is saying.
Plus, when the message comes from his mouth to mine, it has to travel through a medium. Sometimes that's 10 kids at the dinner table, right? So if you've ever played that game, Whisper Down the Lane, the whole message gets distorted by the time you got it.